everybody. Welcome. It's so good this is our third webinar in our series on all things advocacy with disability. And my name is Jeremy Opperman, and I'm calling in from Cape Town, South Africa. And I'm moderating today on a really interesting subject, and a subject that isn't spoken of enough, I think. It's interesting, you know, we were talking about what's our next topic going to be, and then we had a friend join us, and listening to her, we decided, actually, you know what, we've just found our new topic. And essentially the topic is about ableism in the insurance industry. Essentially what that means is, does the insurance industry essentially support persons with disabilities? Are they in any way our friends? Are they our allies? Do they serve us adequately? And these are really interesting questions. We've made our lives hard for ourselves in this particular webinar because we have a group of friends that we commune with in this webinar. Not just those of you who are watching, but the actual panel that we work with. And so I'd like to offer each of them a 30-second, perhaps 1-minute intro. Don't steal your own thunder for later. So just a quick intro on each of you. And I'll go around the world clock, so to speak, anti-clockwise. So starting in Indiana, we have my name brother, Jeremy Warrener. Jeremy, introduce yourself very quickly.
Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today. My background actually was in the hotel and restaurant hospitality industry before I acquired my disability 17 years ago when a 16-year-old turned left in front of me on a county road. As a result, I woke up 6 weeks later in a hospital bed to discover that I had become a bilateral above knee amputee. And that is what launched me into the disability community. Over the years, I have also developed type 2 diabetes, severe sleep apnea, and have also been diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety. So lots of complex disabilities going on. That is kind of what launched me to, as I said, into the disability community. As a result of those experiences, I developed my own organization, Walking Spirit, which provides accessible diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging assessments, consulting, training, and then ongoing support after I visited your operation. So that is who I am. I am also putting my website and contact information into the chat if anybody needs any further information.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you. And staying in America, a little bit east, North Carolina, Ali Ingersoll, our ringer for today and all-around star. Ali, take it away.
Thanks, Jeremy. Pleasure to be here. My background started out in day trading for many years prior to my accident, breaking my neck in 2010, leaving me a C6 quadriplegic, spending nearly 7 years in bed, being denied every piece of equipment I needed to survive in life, let alone thrive, prompted my disability advocacy mission, fighting health insurance companies for fun, and taking my work national to help organizations, people, and individuals. And then I married my background in entrepreneurship and day trading with advocacy to launch into diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy consulting for corporations with a focus on disability and keynote speaking. And so now I work with a beautiful group of people in the pan-disability community globally on digital inclusion, digital accessibility, health insurance advocacy. So I have a jack of all trades. I just 2 philosophies in life: human kindness and paying it forward.
And I love what you've left off. Come on, man, don't spoil it. What are you now exactly? What is your claim to fame right now?
I claim to fame. I'm Miss Wheelchair America 2023. So it's a advocacy competition. So I won it for my efforts in health insurance.
Thank you. Thank you. Hiding her light under a bushel. And so, I beg your pardon, I'm so sorry. And so staying on that side of the world, Going south and tiny bit east, we have in Brazil, Luis Mausch.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Luis Mausch. I am a white man with light brown hair and barb. I'm using a gray shirt. So it's a pleasure being here today. I've been working in disability and accessibility field at least 20 years. I am one of the co-founders of Mais Diferenças, is More Differences, is a no-profit organization here in Brazil. We are focusing on advocacy, cultural and educational projects. And I'm also running a company, a private company. It's called Catalysis Technologies. So we are running a lot of projects in fields of digital accessibility and content accessibility as well. And I'm really curious. I really love this kind of discussions. I think that we stay some meeting before this, and it's amazing. We hope you like a lot what we are going to discuss here, and please enjoy us and that we have here in Brazil. We have like a wonderful morning. We have a sunny morning here, but let's do it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Luis. That's brilliant. Thank you. And then heading due east, we'll bump into me. And so my name is Jeremy Opperman. I'm a disability inclusion specialist and analyst. I've been doing this now for the last 24 years. I am blind. So you can pull faces at me, but I'm not going to be able to see, I'm afraid. And I've been having a lot of fun recently with moderation of podcasts and webinars like this. I do a lot of awareness training and essentially coaching and mentoring organizations into the idea of disability inclusion at all levels. I am a particular advocate of holistic disability inclusion, which takes into account not just employment of persons with disabilities, but across the scope, right into society, looking at every aspect of society that we need to embrace inclusion. And then I must also mention I'm a Rotarian. This particular webinar wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for various serendipitous things around Rotary. Now, moving north and a little bit more east even, we have from Kenya, Jackie Njeru. Hey, Jackie.
Hi, Jeremy. Greetings all. It's 4 p.m. in Kenya. A good morning to you all. My name is Rotarian Jackie Njeru, the president-elect of Rotary Club of Milimani. My installation is busy 10, so in a few days I'll be the president of the Rotary Club of Milimani. I do insurance as a career. I'm into insurance and financial services, and I also do advocacy for the hearing impaired persons. So I like to venture into special names as well. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And I think maybe it's safe to mention that that's one of the reasons why you're as strong an advocate as you are, is because your son is deaf.
Yes. It was a very tough journey for me as a parent of a hearing impaired child. So I'd want to help other parents, if not even financially, at least offer them emotional support in this long journey. Yes.
Excellent. Good. And we're going to touch on that a little bit more later. And moving north and a little bit more east even, we have from Egypt, Jacqueline Wilson. Hi, Jackie.
Yes.
Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi. Hello, Jimmy. I'm delighted to be with you. My name is Jacqueline Wilson from Alexandria, Egypt. I am a proud Rotarian. I'm the founder and the president of the first e-club in my district, 2451. My job is originally a physician. I work as a deputy manager of one of the private hospitals here in Alexandria. I think that the journey with disability took me just for 1 year ago when I was invited by the President Ken Masson to attend different lectures and meetings about the disability. His enthusiasm inspired me a lot, and I feel so grateful for your kind invitation. I attended before two meetings, one about the advocacy and the second was about the ableism and the social media. And I think that the problem of disability is very critical here in Egypt. So I love to discuss today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline, very much. Can we assume that Nalish is still not in the room?
No, Nalish is here.
Ah, Nalish, welcome, welcome. And even now we're going due east, and we get to Mumbai, India, and Nalish Singhit. Nalish, welcome.
Thank you, Jeremy. Sorry, I was a bit groggy and like I overslept. I think we are doing introductions, right? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Yeah, are we doing introductions?
Yes,
right?
just introductions, just the introduction.
Yeah, I am Nilesh Singhit. I am a person with cerebral palsy and been kind of involved in disability rights activism for nearly 25 years now. And as far as the topic at hand is concerned, the disability is, everybody has disability, but as far as insurance goes, people with disability find it very difficult. Living the life of a disabled person means that, you have the cost of living, goes completely high. You have to pay for a lot of things. So I've been kind of working on this for some time. And later on, when I, get the chance, I'll go elaborate. In India, we've been, have had mixed responses. I think I would like to look at it as a glass half full, and work towards something better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, there we have our team, and what we do in this webinar is we don't do a question and answer panel really, but I try and focus on dialoguing to really inspire a more free-form conversation. So the others have no clue where I'm actually going, and so I tend to ambush them from time to time with questions and suggestions of what they might speak about. Now, as the person who really kicked us off with this topic, Ali, without going into too much detail, because I think what you'll be able to do a little bit later to add a bit more color to the story is to flesh out a little bit the reason why you were invited into this webinar is your very particular experience with the insurance, with medical insurance, and how you tackled it. So I'm curious whether, as I said, don't go into too much detail right now, but the broad strokes. What exactly made you get into this from an interest point of view? What happened?
Great question. I will be brief. I was spending a year in bed with a pressure sore, which is a giant hole down to my tailbone. And I was being denied medically necessary equipment from insurance companies. And I had a whole year in bed to think about that and contemplate. So I went on the Herculean mission of realizing that my doctors were writing letters of medical necessity in the United States. There were about 3 sentences with no medical codes, the wrong diagnoses codes, and not explaining why. From a medical standpoint, it said piece of equipment was necessary for my survival. So I learned to write letters of medical necessity by myself. I just get the doctor's signature. They get to take all the credit, which is fine. And I back it up by peer-reviewed journal articles. So when I started to navigate the health insurance appeals process, I started to win everything, which was really surprising, unless it was only if it had a medical code, though. If it does not have a medical code, it's a very different story. So that was how my journey began. When you spend a year in bed, you have to keep yourself very occupied. Otherwise, you can go down a very deep, dark road.
I'm sure. One of the things I want to bring up with you a little bit later, not now, is how you involved media or potentially involved media, but we'll deal with that just now. But staying with injury and having to deal with the darker side of the insurance world, I think the next person should be Jeremy. Jeremy Warrener, your experience with insurance, and it's slightly different from Ali's, but just get the brushstrokes.
So as I mentioned, I lost both of my legs in a vehicle fire. So I became a bilateral above knee amputee in what to me was overnight. So to give you a sense of the cost, my very first leg, which was just a pipe with a hinge in the middle where your knee should be, and a foot that looked like something that belonged on a mannequin at a grocery store or a clothing store, that cost around, I want to say, $5,000. And
Okay.
then moving from that to the next set of legs, which I had within a few months of that first leg, those were probably closer to $10,000 per knee and had very little technology involved. The next set of legs, which was about 2 years later, was a set of legs with microprocessor controlled knees. And those ran at a cost of about $60,000 per leg. And then 7 years after that, I progressed to a set of legs that I'm still walking on today that have an artificial intelligence added to the microprocessor. Those ran at a cost of around $75,000 per knee. And we are now at a point where I am, those legs are wearing out. And so I'm actually testing the next phase of that technology next Tuesday. My insurance company initially denied every single prosthetic leg that I was ever prescribed up until the most recent set. And those, because of how we worked with them to get prior authorization before getting into it, was a much different story. But I had to learn how to pick up the phone, call the insurance company, and advocate for myself with them about the fact that I needed the ability to ambulate. And so they had to approve the prosthetic legs. And then as that technology advanced, I had to continue that advocacy effort to the point where a provider actually had me sign off that I knew that if insurance would not cover that $60,000 per knee, so $120,000 set of legs, that if insurance wouldn't cover it, that I would be responsible for the full amount. It took me 3 years and ultimately developing a relationship with somebody within the insurance company itself to get the information that I needed, their internal policy, and to be able to show that the way they were using medical terminology did not meet the definitions of those words. And ultimately got the insurance company to cover the legs, but then had an entire other lawsuit to go after the provider because they weren't wanting to give back the money that I had paid after the insurance company covered them.
Wow. So, okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Interesting stories. Now, across the world, in Kenya, Jackie and Jeru, you had an interesting situation. You've had two interesting situations in the way that you approached your son needing cochlear implants. Tell us about the first time. This is not so much about insurance, although there is an element of that. Tell us about what happened when you first needed your son's first cochlear implant.
Yeah, when I first did the first cochlear implant, I was lucky that my son was actually a dependent of the National Health Insurance Fund for the civil servants in Kenya. That one was a bit easy because now we just met all the requirements that were needed. We made the checklist and we were able to go to India within a short time and the implant done. So it didn't really take us a lot of time. Well, the process was rigorous because we needed to do like 9 things that we did within a week. And the following week, we were ready to go to India.
Wow.
So it was easier that time with the National Health Insurance.
That's great. That's great. So that's a national health insurance, right? Okay. As
Yes,
opposed to a
yes,
private health insurance, which is what we,
exactly.
this isn't one. I just want to interrupt Jackie for a second here and make a bit of a point about this, because one of the beauties of having so many people from different parts of the world here is that the experiences are very different, because we tend to be quite focused. When we hook into something on advocacy, we tend to be quite focused, and it's very often in a geographical area. And I think it's rather useful to see perspectives from around the world here. So this was Kenya's national health insurance, and it was a good experience, and that's terrific. Then what
Yeah.
happened? You went to India and you had the implant, and then?
Yes, we had the implant done. That was in 2016. The same kind of the same type of insurance also took us back there in 2017 for the review. It has also helped us with the speech therapy sessions, which is a bit costly in Kenya. So that type of insurance has been very helpful to us over the years.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now recently, doesn't your son need additional, and there's some challenge now?
Yes. My son now was supposed to, because he has a bilateral profound hearing loss. So we only did one implant on the right ear. So he's need of the second one, which needs to be done. Unfortunately, is no longer a beneficiary of the National Health Insurance. So I was trying my private insurance cover to see whether it can help him. But unfortunately, they declined. They said actually that hearing aids are an exclusion, and that it's a common practice all over the world. And when it came to that, I asked them, what about spectacles? I mean, if you can give people who are visually impaired spectacles, I don't see why you can't give the hearing aids to the hearing impaired. And they said, I'm sorry, that is the common practice all over the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, no, that puts us in a similar dilemma then from our friends across the water. So Nilesh, you've had some experience in terms of requiring insurance assistance. What's your experience in Mumbai, India? Nilesh Singh.
Yeah. As a person with disability cerebral palsy, I have been always told that I can never get health insurance, and that is something that now I've come to live with. But my recent experience with the National Trust where I was working, National Trust is also an act for people with cerebral palsy, autism, mental retardation, and multiple disabilities. So there, first time in India, there was a scheme that was provided for people with these disabilities that fall under a national trust, where a certain amount was given every for them with a very low premium. I think it was like 200 rupees per year, which anybody can actually afford. It's not very much. There were a lot of teething problems initially, where people faced a lot of problems getting it because there were too many people applying, and sometimes the wrong kind of people were applying. I think that has not been sorted out. So that is the only insurance that was available till recently. Now, I've been kind of advocating for insurance for some time, and IRDAI, sorry, please don't ask me what it stands for. It's the governing body in India that regulates all insurance companies. So they have come up with a notice that is given to all insurance companies that no person with disability can be denied insurance on the grounds of disability. So that came just few months back, and and it was a good thing. I applied for insurance. Mine got rejected on the grounds of Jeremy Warner was saying about all these various technical terms that they were using. So I got rejected, and then I have lodged a complaint. I am still waiting for them to kind of get back to me as to what needs to be done. So that is one thing. And my experience, like I said, I've been working on disability law for quite some time. And I have noticed that the disability law, certain definitions are there, but insurance companies use exactly completely different definitions. I think they deliberately do it. What we need to do is kind of, have these definitions in consonance with each other. I mean, there should be some regulatory body that says that if disability is defined in a particular way in, say, certain act, then everybody should follow that. Insurance companies should not be given that leeway to kind of have their own definitions going around.
Okay.
I've been working with lawyers, and I thought they were the most difficult people to work with. And now I think the insurance people are even worse than them. Shakespeare said all lawyers should be kind of put to sword. If he were alive, I would have said, please add the insurance people also. I mean,
Thank you.
so,
Thank you. Okay.
I'd like to add one more point
Okay.
here.
Okay. Quickly.
I think Jeremy was saying that prostheses are, difficult to get, and the thing is, the entire medical community is a little, they do it, I think, deliberately. The entire thing of right to repair doesn't exist. So you're forced to buy whatever thing they're giving, and if it doesn't work, either you kind of discard it or buy new. And if it's not covered by insurance, you've kind of had it. Recently, there was this lady, who she kind of won a wheelchair in some contest, high-end wheelchair, and there was some minor problem, and they were charging her a bomb to kind of repair it. So she had just put it in a post saying that, can anybody help me repair it? And somehow somebody helped her out in, doing it in a very reverse engineered it and helped her out. So I think we need to look at other issues also, right to repair and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, okay, so we're getting a very clear pattern here. Now, here, Luis Marsh, Brazil, you've got some interesting observations that you made quite recently about medical insurance in Brazil. What happened that you pointed out the other day to us?
Okay, Jeremy, thank you for asking. Yeah, I'm just going to have a brief, just to understand a little bit about how it works in Brazil. Yeah, we have you have the public system in Brazil, we call SUS, is like in translation is unique system, health system. And mostly persons with disability, they get their prostheses or their assistive technology are provided by the government. And part of them are privately provided. So the insurance health company, they don't provide any assistive technology or wheelchairs or that stuff. So it's talking about the public system, if things are getting better, so you can have better products like good prostheses or hearing aids or this kind of thing. But part of the problem that you have in the public system is sometimes they can give you the wheelchair, but they don't help you to support or to maintain this wheelchair. That sometimes is really expensive. Sometimes they give you the hearing aid, but they don't give you the energy, the battery. And some really poor families, they can't even afford this kind of thing. So the system has a lot of problems. Talking about the private system, what happens is that we have the national agency that runs and is the authority of this kind of companies. And we have a special list. We have a list that was included in your plan or not included. They cannot say that I'm not going to accept someone with disability or any kind of different kind of health situation. So what happens is when I'm going to buy this or contract this health insurance, I need to wait 2 years if I have a precondition of health. Any condition can be a disability, can be a heart illness or something around that. So anyone can say that I'm not going to permit or you cannot contract my plan. This is against the law. But what recently are happening with the insurance company is that they are putting the prices really, really high prices for those who have some kind of situation or some kind of disability. So really recently, what happened is that we had almost 200 claims for a congresswoman here in Brazil that they are suffering this unilateral contract they're stopping the contract with persons with disability. But actually, they are saying that we're not doing that, but it's because this kind of person, they cannot afford what they are charging. That sometimes is 50% or 75% of the adjustment that they used to do. So in the end, what is happening, it's like a terrible ableism, because they cannot say that you cannot come to my company and I be my client, but I put a lot of barriers. And in the end, not only the barriers that they need to get access for the health system as well, but like economic barriers, you know. So this is right now what's happening here, Jeremy. On the other side, we recently, just another point, we recently had like a really interesting movement from a lot of advocacy talking about the autism. So they could put a lot of different treatments in this list that start to apply the plans to also give them more attention for persons with autism or other kind of disability as well. And this is happening because we have a lot of persons with disability and family advocating for this changing in the national health system. And some insurance companies right now, they are opening like centers that can provide these kinds of treatment or attention for persons with autism spectrum. So this is just an overview.
Thank you. Wow, interesting. And to close the loop, let's go to Egypt. Jacqueline Wilson, you've got an interesting situation in Egypt. You've got two primary insurers in a sense. You've got your Solidarity and you've got your Department of Defense. But I know you've said before, far too many people aren't covered, are they? Don't have any cover at all. Is that right?
I have no private experience with medical insurance like you, but I have a private experience with my patients as an advocate and supportive to my patients. You know that the situation in Egypt is different. We are a developing country. We have a scarce resources. You know that the patient needs assistive medical devices, but this is not the first time to let him afford money. The journey is very long, and usually the caregivers or the parents of the disabled person spend a lot of money for diagnosis, for treatment, for investigations, and then the last step on his rehabilitation. So they couldn't afford to pay. So you will find that it's very crucial to have a good insurance companies here in Egypt. In addition to the huge number of disabled persons, if we return back to the statistics of the disabled persons here in Egypt, you will find that we have around 13% of population are disabled. It means that more than 14 million of Egyptians are disabled. All of them, at any time, at any age, they need assistive medical device. Can you imagine how many devices we need? And so you can imagine the importance of the insurance companies in Egypt.
Thank you.
It's very important. So I think that this topic addressed a very important problem in Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, what I want to go, thank you for that. And it really is a sobering number, that, isn't it? You know, and I think what you'll realize is that that's an underestimation. There's no country in the world, I suspect, that doesn't have a minimum 15%, judging by World Health Organization standards. But let's not get into a numbers argument here. What's important here, and I'm going to bring in Jeremy and Ali as well into this, and we must just break our answers a little briefer from now on, if you don't mind, is the need for support. So we've got advocacy. Now we've got various types of advocacy. Jacqueline mentioned now how she, as a doctor, supports her patients. That's wonderful. Ali, you had something interesting. I loved your story when I first heard it, in the way that you invoked potential media involvement in your first victory, I suppose. And how important was that, do you think, into invoking the media in your issue?
It was absolutely critical when it was for a seat elevator for a power wheelchair that in the United States are still a non-covered benefit item, but I'm happy to say many of us have worked and they're about to be approved as medically necessary with Medicare and Medicaid, but
Really? That's
they
great.
are a coalition of 200 of us. Yep. The determination comes out next week. In any event, so I was denied, and because it was a non-covered benefit item, insurance denied me to the highest level, and the Department of Insurance in the United States in each state would not help me. They will and submit an external review. But to fast forward, I reached out to 57 investigative reporters, and 3 emailed me back, 2 of which came to the home. So I got the story out, and they investigated with Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina here in the United States. And I got a sheepish letter 2 weeks later stating that this piece of equipment was medically necessary. However, it was not a precedent, so others could not use this, that's a huge challenge in the United States, which is what prompted me on much of my personal life advocacy mission on introducing legislation and pushing forward on different pieces of equipment and services as well, because there's a huge challenge here in the United States where before Obamacare, very shortly, insurance companies could discriminate against pre-existing conditions, and Obamacare said they could not. But if you look critically, we're starting to dive right back into that, but in a very gray water, technically legal area where all the networks in the United States for those individuals getting health insurance privately, it's shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So essentially they're discriminating against pre-existing conditions once again. So we're moving backwards in time, sadly.
Interesting. Now that's interesting, because that's exactly what Louise Marsh was talking about in Brazil, is that we're getting to see an impunity here and a lack of accountability where insurance companies are in fact crossing the line.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about another kind of advocacy, so what Ali did was quite macro, would you say, Jeremy Warrener? Yours, on the other hand, was more invoking a relationship type advocacy, not so? Tell us your story a little bit.
Yeah,
quite briefly, if you could.
It really began with being where it first began was actually reaching out to the community and saying, I'm running into this issue. And it was a person from within my church who reached out and said, let's talk about ways that you could approach this. And she was the one that had the idea of developing a relationship with somebody at Blue Cross Blue Shield. And so it was in that initial call with the person that I spoke with, asking if I could get a direct line to be able to follow up with them again. And they were willing to give me that. And then developing that relationship, calling really on a weekly basis and engaging them in the effort to get their own organization to cover, to ultimately cover it. And the first denial was that it wasn't medically necessary. And that honestly happened because when the provider submitted the claim, they did not include a letter of medical necessity from my doctor. So there are all these ducks that you got to make certain are in a row when you go down this road. And so then on the next appeal, we had that letter of medical necessity, and they came back and they said that it was a luxury item. And then we argued that, and then they came back and they said that it was experimental. And that was about the time that I got that person within the organization to share with me the internal policy that said, in regards to microprocessor controlled prosthetics, to deny in all circumstances. And so once I had that, and I had the fact that the prosthetics that I was getting were approved for use in the United States by the FDA, they no longer met the terms of experimental. So once we had that internal policy and the failure to use terms based upon their definition, then we were able to get that covered. So
thank you. They now listeners who aren't necessarily steeped in this might be seeing quite a serious pattern here, and I certainly am. I mean, I don't have many examples of, in my own experience, bar one amusing thing. About 35 years ago, I took out an insurance policy on my little annuity, and you know, and they made it very clear that it would not cover me in the event of a car accident or a train accident. And it was the weirdest thing. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. Now, the trouble was, it was an enormous insurance company. And so I tried to access the underwriters about, please explain this. On the grounds of my blindness, it cannot cover me in the case of a car accident or a train accident. The thing was, I couldn't access the underwriters. And so I canceled the policy. And I went to a much smaller little insurance company, and I got far greater service. And I was able to access, and they had a very similar thing. They didn't bring the train in, but they said, in the event of a car accident, you are not covered. And so I challenged it. But because it was an insurer, a smaller insurer, I was able to reach the underwriter. And it took about 30 seconds for him to realize that this was nonsensical, since I didn't drive. So how on earth could I possibly be held culpable in a car accident? Now, this brings up the issue of service and access to service. And you mentioned AI, Jeremy Warner, earlier. A friend of mine reached out to me when I sent her this invitation. She might even be in the room, and said, don't forget to mention AI as an obstacle, not necessarily an ally. And I'm listening to your litany of how often you've had to contact the insurer, and certainly Ali had that, and no doubt Nalish and Jackie as well. What role does access play? Now let's talk about access. We've got access in the sense of reaching a live person in an insurance company, as opposed to a robot or an AI generated response bot in a insurance. Do you see this becoming serious, Ali and Jeremy Warner and Luis particularly, because you're very technical? Do you think we're heading towards a problem here with AI interrupting the service chain?
I'll go first. I would say that we've actually, that issue, that problem has been developing not just within the insurance company, but within any organization that provides a service that you have to call and talk to. That just being able to get to a live person becomes a challenge, and you find yourself having becoming more and more aggravated. And if you deal with hidden disabilities like anxiety and PTSD and those types of things, the way the system is set up, it actually aggravates those disabilities before you ever get to the live person. And so it's very important when you get to that live person, one, don't give up on the automated system. You've got to get through to the live person. And once you get to that live person, it's really important to not attack them because of what the company's automated system has put you through before you get there, because you've got to build that allyship with that individual as soon as you get them.
I'll tack on to that, Jeremy, with that allyship. You're absolutely right. I just gave a keynote speech, and you may be passed along to 15 different people, and the person you're speaking with, they don't know the whole story, right? So there's frustrations. They're being yelled at all day. You're getting frustrated because you've been on the phone for 3 hours. But what Jeremy spoke about earlier with an internal person in the United States, generally they're called customer escalation department managers, and you are entitled to one as a patient. They don't tell you this. I don't know why they don't tell you this, but I've become best friends with mine. I call her up on the phone. We have her cell phone number. I submit all my insurance paperwork. I get it from my doctors and I submit it to her, and we look and we cross all the T's and dot all the I's. It's astounding how often they leave very key pieces of information. And as you mentioned, Jeremy, letters of medical necessity. And speaking to the AI, I get so frustrated, and it's pointless for me to call my private insurance company to the claim specialist because I get nowhere. So to prevent myself from waiting on the phone, I just keep pressing 0. Honestly, I press it about 20 times and I always get somebody. They just assume I don't know how to use the phone, which is fine, but it does get me someone faster. So the patient portals are quite useful. And they're becoming more accessible, and they remind you of doctor's appointments and so forth on text or email or whatever your access needs are, which is preference. But it is for those of us with complex medical needs requiring multifaceted solutions, AI is it's not a one size fits all.
Thank you. And Nilesh, Singit, in Mumbai, what do you think the toll is on people with disabilities who face these kinds of additional challenges, unnecessary challenges?
Toll, as you mean cost of living?
Sorry, Nilesh, did you miss the question?
No, I'm asking by toll, do you mean cost of living?
Yes.
I guess, I mean, there is a lot, I mean, as a person with disability, I mean, especially, I mean, I'm talking about myself. Every time I fall ill, there are a lot of medicines I need to take. And what sometimes, I mean, you know, what people don't understand is most of the time doctors give, I mean, you know, very generic kind of a medicine for the particular ailment. They don't consider my you know, condition as a person with cerebral palsy. So it's kind of, you know, a lot of times it is hit and miss for them. If it is hit, then, I mean, you know, I kind of, you know, I'm better quickly. If it is a miss, then I have to go all through the thing of, you know, the allergies and side effects, and then kind of, you know, go through again with the new kind of medicine. So that is something that, you know, the doctors need to kind of understand that, I mean, you know, when they're treating a person with certain severe disabilities, they kind of need to take a lot of things into consideration. That leads a lot of cost. And I mean, you were talking about accessibility. None of the hospitals are disabled friendly, unfortunately. The only ramp that you have at the hospital is the one that they use for the stretcher. I mean, you know, after that, I mean, you know, using a toilet or most of the facilities are actually not very disabled friendly. Even the bed that they use to kind of check you are at a height. You need at least 2-3 people to kind of lift you up.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and a lot of most those things kind of add up, and many times that leads to injuries also. Again, you're back to square one. So you know, you kind of get into that vicious circle.
Well, yes, and what I was getting at, Nilesh, is the toll on one's emotional state, one's anxiety. Obviously, from a cost of living point of view, you know, things are very expensive everywhere, obviously, and that's why we have things like insurance and support. But you know, the accessibility that's often is an artificial barrier from people with disabilities from being able to access even national health insurance, things like accessible websites, accessible venues. I mean, Luis Marsh in Brazil, do you see access as being something that's getting worse, or do you think we're getting better at it? You know a lot about access. What's your thought, particularly digital?
Yeah, Jeremy, just to have in mind that insurance companies, they are huge and big company, and they work like if I have 1,000 clients, I need that 10% use a lot, and the other 19% doesn't use my system. Otherwise, I'm not going to be profitable. Yeah, so this is the basis of insurance company mind. Yeah, it's like a mutual system. And if they can create like really subtle barriers, they will. If we are talking about how they will attend their clients, whatever they do, they will, because in the end, it's how they can get more profitable. It's about their business. And not being criticized there, because that's the way it is. But I really truly believe that part of we have like a attention is through accessibility, you know, because even Germany and Ireland, they say that, okay, we have a huge stature, find someone that could hear us and then address what they need. If I have only AI, if I have only telephone calling sites, well, steps, I don't have anyone that I can create this sympathy with them, you know. And then I really believe that it's part of a strategy that they cannot give a lot of different channels, a lot of different ways to talk to their clients. Imagine, for example, if I am there, how can I communicate? Because in the end, Jeremy and Ellie, they say that, oh, we talk with them, we call them every week, all this stuff. But if I am deaf, I cannot do this. So someone needs to do this for me. And it's not the most properly person that will do that. So in the end, for sure that accessibility are getting better. The portals are getting more digital accessible. We in Brazil, we have some relays providers that can use sign language, but in the end, it's not enough, you know. And sometimes it's really complicated to understand. Someone that even doesn't have any kind of disability, or even doesn't have any kind of intellectual disability, and mostly here in Brazil, that we are a country that we have a huge problem of literacy, we cannot understand this system. Okay, but I need to go there, and after that go there. So it's really confused. And in my point of view, this is part of what companies are doing, not to provide their service in the end, you know. So I think this is something really important that we need to look at. How we can get more accessible, how we can reach the service, how this cannot be a fight. Everybody just talk here about the personal fight or crusade to get what they are paying for.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah, and I think this is the case, and this is, in my view, this is the whole dilemma. It's the scale, if you like. You've got this balance between a company that wants to make money. Let's not be naive about this, and people who require service, and sometimes the service is more complex and expensive, certainly. But that's the risk of insurance. That's the whole point of insurance. It's all about risk. And I started, not this webinar, but when we were planning this, I remember saying sometime, the insurance company isn't your friend. He's not meant to be your friend. He's there to make money. And I think our role here, and hopefully that some seeds of thought have been stimulated in this conversation, is to in fact put pressure on them to say, yes, I understand your money-making rationale in business, but you need to also understand that some of your clients and patients are not going to be the average, and there is going to be greater complexity. Ali, what would you think would be a useful tip? What would, if you were to sit in front of the board of a major health insurance company, give me 3 things that you would say you need to do in order to serve people with disabilities better?
Number one, whether in the United States, you have multiple levels of appeals. You have a prior authorization, you're denied first level of appeals, then second, and then final determination. I know for a fact, because I know someone high up in my insurance company who told me something I should not know, but folks that are sitting on a panel that are reviewing a case have 0 to no medical background at all. They do not understand complex medical conditions. I guarantee you on the prior authorization, they're just looking for crossed T's and I's dotted. By the time you get to the second level of appeals, you may have some doctors who may be a general practitioner, and they're looking at someone like myself with spinal cord injury, and they're trying to assess a mattress, pressure relieving mattress for pressure sores as an example. They have no concept of these secondary complications as well. That would be my first piece of advice. The second would be to create a patient advisory council for either pro bono or for those for a small stipend for those of us who want to get involved and utilize us. We are, there are many of us in the disability community. We're not just I don't believe in just giving equipment here and there or different medical services. There needs to be a medical necessity reason, but oftentimes they don't understand these complex medical syndromes. I was giving a speech to the North Carolina Medical Society, and I was shocked to learn that in med school nowadays in the United States, they don't teach courses on complex medical conditions. That was shocking. So the new young minds are not learning about the challenges many of us with different access needs who have multifaceted solutions are running into. So those would be my 3 pieces of advice to start.
Wow. Thank you. On that note, Jacqueline Wilson, as a doctor, do you think doctors need to play a greater role and can play a greater role to support patients? Do you think doctors have a greater role to play in supporting their patients' claims?
Yeah, I think so. First, I think that this is not a medical problem. It's a business model, and as you mentioned, I totally agreed with you that the insurance companies try to get benefit from the money, try to squeeze the cost, try to deny the claims. So what we try to do as medical advocate is to teach the doctor first how to write a medical claim, because the medical claim in many times here in Egypt refused for medical reasons, because the doctor usually writes only the diagnosis of the case, not the way of the limitation or the how the disease limits the ability of the person. So we have to teach the doctors who write the medical claims how to write it correctly, because to avoid this denial, they have to write a complete history of the patient, the cause of the disability, the high risk factors that may precipitate disability, how to avoid more complications or sequelae related to his disability, because all these factors make a pressure on the insurance company and make her to be convinced to give the permission of the aid. This is the first, I think, the first way we can advocate the doctor. The second, I think that health awareness regarding the medical companies. We should advise the insurance companies to be kind and humanitarian, because this refusal will lead to depression of the patients, depression of the caregivers, and will lead to the impact on the whole community, not only to the just one patient and one family.
Yeah. That's very interesting. That this is that issue of pressure is so important. You know, the knock-on effect of the difficulty that people have with accessing things which should be straightforward. I mean, if I were to be asked, I would have said that there is definitely a case for people with chronic conditions or very serious conditions which are very easily identifiable. So for instance, Jackie and Jeru with a son who needs a cochlear implant, that's a radical device and a very serious issue. And I do believe there should be a scale and there should be levels, and so when a person with a disability, a significant disability, should in fact click into a tranche of patients / customers. Okay, they are exceptional. Because this is one thing I've learned about disability, or disability inclusion, is that it's not necessarily precedent setting, and that people with disabilities are almost always unique in some description in terms of their reasonable accommodation and their requirements, whether it's employment or we're getting into a hotel. And I do believe that we need to wake up. Ali's point about boards, assessment boards rarely having doctors is very true. I remember that from my own work some years ago with a medical insurer. And I was fascinated at how many of the senior people were in fact old actuaries. Now, if Ali, I'm not sure if you know this as the only person in this panel with a spinal cord injury, that 50 years ago, has anyone told you what your life expectancy would have been as a C6 quadriplegic in terms of actuarial tables?
I do. I have friends that are in their 70s now. Back then, they told me when they were injured, their life expectancy was in their mid 40s to early 50s.
Exactly. Now, insurance companies have very rarely changed that mindset. And that's an old trope, that. And so what I've noticed with my clients in the insurance industry, and I don't believe it's different anywhere in the world, is that the original sin ultimately is a lack of awareness. A lack of awareness of modern thinking around disability, of latest thinking in terms of inclusion, of genuine, diversity, equity, and inclusion mindsets in the disability world. And yet, unfortunately, I've noticed that the products themselves work against disability. On the one hand, in my country, we have insurance companies that actively support people who want to claim disability to leave work. On the other hand, we have an act that says we really must try and hire more people with disabilities. And so on one hand, you're trying to employ people with disabilities, and on the other, you're actually encouraging them to leave work because they so-called have disabilities, or they have disability, and they go on disability leave, which is an ancient mindset, an old-fashioned actuarial mindset, which says, well, people with disabilities don't work. So, there's no point in them hanging around. So I do believe, would we agree on this panel? Anybody can say anything, but would we agree that the insurance industry in general needs a wake-up call and needs to get into the 21st century in terms of disability? Nilesh, would you like to comment on that? Did you hear the question?
Yes, I heard your question. In fact, I have a slightly different take on it. While I was working on the airlines, getting access, accessibility in airlines. At that time, one of the persons I became friends with over a period of time told me the reason that whatever you've been getting, I had damaged my wheelchair and I managed to get a new wheelchair. It simply means that it is there within their policy that they have to give you certain things, and you've got it. What they will do is that they will kind of use disabilities diversity against people with disability. Next time somebody with another problem would come, they would find ways to not to give that thing to that person. So going back to our own topic at hand, Jeremy, Warner, and Ali got whatever they got. So that means that they had it in the policy, and they use all kinds of means to kind of see that other people don't get it. It's a business for them. Just imagine 20 people with disabilities kind of getting whatever they want. They are going to face problems. So it would be a huge loss for them. So we need to kind of have a system wherein the entire thing is worked on a basis wherein government kind of supports. There is some kind of thing of health insurance actually needs to be redefined in a very positive way, and then kind of work on it. If the present system as it is, I think we are going to kind of hit the wall all the time. Maybe there will be successes, but then will be more failures. We need to look at it. And then the other thing about doctors, actually there is a lot of nexus between the doctors and the insurance companies. So when they kind of write whatever they do, many times they do it deliberately, not so that people, whoever is applying, don't get it. And I have been kind of doing research on it quite some time. So we have to kind of look at every step where we hit roadblocks and then kind of work around it. Otherwise, just the whole thing is more like fire. We are at present we are firefighting. We just kind of looking at the thing of there is a fire and we are fighting it. We are not looking at why there is a fire and how we can prevent it. I hope I answered your question.
You did. Now, we're running out of time. We've done over an hour now, and I would love to open it up to the floor if anybody has comments or questions. So I want to, I'm just going to quickly spin around the room, very quickly, briefly. Don't take up too much more time, but any burning thoughts? And I'm going to begin with the people who have spoken the least. Any last burning thoughts? Jackie and Jeru in Kenya, any thoughts that you want to add that you might have wanted to put in and I didn't ask you about?
Yes, Jeremy. My thoughts are that, especially being in the insurance industry, that they should look. I know much as they're in business. I'm talking as now as an entrepreneur. I know they need to make profits and all that. But if they can really have a human face to it, just as the doctor has said, and even pay. There's what we call in insurance ex gratia payments. Ex gratia means you're not. It's not your right to be paid,
It's
but
exceptional.
they can yes.
Yes.
So if they can have that to some of the extreme cases, it can really come in handy. It can really come in handy for the parents, especially the caregivers, who some of them give up along the way because they are very helpless about their persons with special needs whom they cannot be able to help, or maybe they have reached their limit in terms of resources and all that.
Yeah, good. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Louise Marsh, any last thoughts from your side?
Well, I think one important thing, Jeremy, is to understand and perhaps to advocate with insurance companies. And sometimes I believe that we are not working with a health system, but with an illness system. Yeah. And for example, Ellie just give a great example that she spent lots of years in a bed with cold, with sore, with other things like secondary causes or disease or illness, you know. So sometimes that the insurance need to understand, but if we give like Ellie a proper cushion, a proper wheelchair, and the proper condition, she'll be like the wheelchair in America, you know. That's what the whole is. So not only the society are losing a lot, but even the insurance company, because otherwise, if Ellie, Jeremy, all the example, they have the right treatment, they have the right condition, and they can really take care of their health, they're not going to be ignorant, and they're not going to use a lot, be a heavy user of the system. But for these, sometimes they need to between my hands to invest in equipment or in better conditions, you know. So I think in the end, this could be part of the problem. But the companies, they don't think about that. They think like, okay, they have an illness, I need to put more money into treatment, all this stuff. They don't have this health mind, you know.
Luis, that's a point I actually made with health insurance. So I started winning a lot of equipment. I wrote them a return on investment and a cost savings where I said, if you pay for this mattress at $3,000 US, you're saving $100,000 that you just spent the last year for all the surgeries, right? So it's about the cost saving measures. So the insurance companies need to rethink and reevaluate the very small percentage of us who have complex secondary complications due to our underlying conditions, how they're actually going to be saving money. And that's where the uphill battle lies in the United States.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I must tell you, it's exactly the same here. I mean, I've got many friends with spinal cord injuries due to the nature of my business. And I am staggered that the insurance company will not pay for a pressure cushion, you know, but they will pay for 10 days in hospital to fix a pressure sore.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm almost innumerate. I'm mathematically stupid, and I have no business sense in that sense. But even a fool like I can see that cannot possibly make business sense. And this is what I mean. At the end of the day, we're looking at basic lack of awareness and thought in this area. Jacqueline Wilson, any burning thoughts? Any burning thoughts that you have? One last burning thought.
Yeah, I have just one comment. We can here work on two parallel ways here in Egypt. The first is to raise the voice of disabled persons to the authorities to change the legislation and to exert pressure on the insurance companies. This is the first. The second parallel way is to do our efforts as advocates to search for alternatives from NGOs and other societies to help and to provide disabled with technology, assistive technology and devices. This is my thought.
Thank you, Jacqueline, very much. Okay, before we run out of time, and unless one of you want to, and I love the way Ellie jumped in there. If anybody's got one more thought, and then I want to hand it over to our friends. Yes.
Can I say something? Last thought.
Yes, please do. Your last burning thought.
Yeah. See, the entire thing of disability is that, you know, when you look at government policies, especially in India, it's always, I mean, talks about prevention of disability. I mean, you know, not about people with disability as such. So what I want to say is, unless the right to life of person with disability is recognized, only then we can talk about insurance.
Yeah,
I mean,
thank you.
prevention of disability basically means that infanticide, or a lot of things. That is the most important thing. First, we have to kind of get right to life on board, Article 10 of the CRPD. Only then we can talk about all these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Thanks.
point.
I
Good
want to
point.
throw in, just to wrap it up. If
Yeah.
you haven't picked it up, the reason that we titled this Advocating Against Ableist Insurance Policy is because policies that affect the people with disabilities, more often than not, are not made by people with disabilities. So they don't actually address the issues. They create more issues, more cost. And the last thing I want to say, whether you were in we're talking about countries that even have insurance policies. So if you get denials, you cannot stay silent. You cannot accept the denial. You need to grow allyship, whether it's within that company or within your community, to make certain that you ultimately get your treatment or your equipment that you need. And if you are in a place where you don't have that, you still need to raise your voice and gather that allyship amongst your community to try to get what it is that you need to make your life more functional.
Being your own self-advocate.
Right.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's I'll have the last word actually quickly before we hand it over, is that so often people with disabilities have felt emasculated, have felt disempowered, have felt broken in some way, and so don't in fact put their hands up. And it's so sad for me when many of them just take it on the chin and don't in fact fight. And I do believe that we need to see more of that as well. Ken, can we quickly, I have had my voice machine, my voiceover off, my NVDA off, so I haven't heard questions coming in, if any.
So, yes.
Do you have any?
Jeremy, Shakila
yeah?
has her hand up.
All right, Shakila, you're it, my countryman.
Hi, Jeremy. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so I'm not sure anymore if what I have to say is relevant, because I think the discussion has moved on considerably. I wanted to quickly share that point, my experience in managing HR in a large corporate, where I first got my exposure as a blind practitioner there to disability in the workplace. And that's when I got into advocacy. And that was when persons became injured in the line of duty and became disabled. Then the insurance companies, as you said earlier on, would reward the disability by removing them from the workplace and making them unemployable. And of course, people chose that route because they didn't know anything different. When I got involved then and became aware of this practice and saw what a wasteland we were creating of talented people, then that's what triggered off the whole thing about retaining the talent and looking for reasonable accommodations to bridge the gap in the way they now continue to do their function. But a very interesting thing emerged during that time. I joined a board of a company that created what they called, and I'm not too sure anymore if that term is cell captive or cell capital, but it was a formula that looked at the level of disablement and then looked at what portion needed to be compensated. And the balance was to rehabilitate you to remain in the same job with the accommodations to continue to function and advance in the workplace. So that was a concept that we were developing. And that was way back in the 90s, mind you. So I don't know what became of that.
Thank you. Thanks, Shakila. That's a very interesting point. And this is, okay, I won't pontificate on that. Shakila, thank you. Ken, any other questions or any other hands up?
I don't see any. People are welcome to put their hand up and ask a question.
Are there any questions in the chat box?
No questions in the chat box.
Wow. Wow. How interesting.
I guess you answered everything.
Now, it looks like it. It looks like it. Anybody have a comment? Anybody would like to contribute now and stick their hands up? You're more than welcome. Wow. I'm not sure if I should be pleased or sad. I'd like me to see the time. All right. I wanted to touch on a couple of things that
Jeremy,
have come up.
Jeremy,
Yes.
you have another
yes.
hand up from
I do.
Yima.
Hey.
Yes, good morning. Well, good morning here. My name is Ima. I was born with spina bifida, and I just wanted to say that this is an excellent conversation, and I think it needs parts 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I know for me, I hate calling insurance companies. I always cry. It gives me tons of anxiety. And just it would be great if we would have more conversations and maybe talk about how also race has to do with the conversation as well. But just thank you.
Pleasure, Ima. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. So one of the things that I want to tell you guys an amusing story, but to give you an idea of what insurance companies can be like. And it is a negative story. We had an incident, Shakila might remember it, must be about 10 years ago now, perhaps a little less. In fact, I think a bit less, 6, 7 years ago. A man was shot in his driveway while doing absolutely nothing. He wasn't doing anything. I forget the reason, but somebody shot him and he died. And on the slab, in the autopsy, the pathologist discovered that he had, in fact, type 1 diabetes. The claim for life, having been murdered now, was denied. In other words, his life insurance was denied on the grounds that he hadn't disclosed that he had type 1 diabetes. And yet he was shot dead. And the insurance company flatly refused to pay. And what was very interesting was that there was a national outcry. The media went bananas and people got really angry about this absurdity. And the insurance company, about a month later, realized that they had seriously put their foot in their mouths and were committing not so much corporate suicide, but they were not going to help themselves. There were huge threats in terms of companies, threatening to leave the insurance company, etc. And they quickly backpedaled and said, okay. And given the circumstances, we will in fact make an ex gratia payment, but by no means is this a precedent-setting situation. And you can't make this stuff up. It staggers me, and I'm sure I'm not the only person to have amusing / tragic stories like this. I think the bottom line here is that, those of us in the room, and there's several of us, Shakila and I have been doing this work together for many years, and there are people in this room who are awesome in terms of advocacy. We know the problem here because we all understand the real deficit is the fact that we have so little genuine understanding of disability as it fits into society. And so I think this particular industry seriously needs to look at itself carefully. And I want to thank everybody that's participated, particularly the panel. You've been awesome again. And thank you for those watchers and listeners who have joined us and have asked questions. And I want to say thank you very much. And we need to look out for our next edition of the webinar. And we're looking for another topic. And Ali, thank you very much for being our guest. And I trust you actually would like to remain with us and maybe we can discuss other issues going forward. Would you enjoy that?
You have me for life, Jeremy.
Brilliant.
But as my English father says, I'm desperately available.
Any last thoughts? I don't have to have the last word. We have 1 or 2 minutes over. Any last thoughts? Anybody want to pitch something? And otherwise, I think Ken,
And we will be sending the recording out to the people on the mailing list we had 109 people register for this. And so I'm sure those who could not make it would like to see it. And we also will be making it available on different social media for people to see. So We'll be posting it. We'll be posting it on YouTube. So there are multiple places that they can respond to it. We can. I'm a member of the Rotary Club of World Disability Advocacy. So if anybody had any questions, they wanted to reach anybody here, they can write to the Rotary Club. We'll make sure that the panel gets the question. But it's that I should put it in the chat. But it's Rotary WDA. It stands for World Disability Advocacy. Rotary WDA @gmail.com, and we'll make sure that the panelists gets those questions is addressed. And if you have any suggestions for future webinars, please share them with us too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you all, everybody.
I want to throw in one more thank you to everybody
Yes,
for
Jerry.
attending, and also point out we have a tendency of preaching to the choir. So please keep your eyes open for our next webinar and help us invite folks that we don't know to come and join us on these conversations.
Yeah, I might point out that I actually invited 3 of my insurance clients. I'm not sure, I wasn't paying attention to who was witnessing, but it'll be interesting to know if we did in fact get business people coming on board. It would have been nice to know. I do know I saw an old name, there, an old friend of mine from university came on. I'm not sure if he stayed, and he's in the finance game. So Sean, if you're still watching, thank you very much for joining. And Sean, I'm not surprised he joined us because his brother is a quadriplegic in Britain. But thank you, everyone, very much. All of you, you've been wonderful. Nilish, Jacqueline, Jackie, Louise, Ali, and Jeremy. And of course, Ken, our backroom marvel. Thank you very much. That's a wrap.
Thank you.
Everyone.